Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Opportunities in Taiwan's Foreign Assistance, Aid Competition, People-to-People Ties, and Diplomacy, an event funded by a generous grant provided by the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. My name is Zoe Weaver-Lee. I'm a program assistant here at TPI, and I will be moderator for today's discussion. The Global Taiwan Institute is a 501c3 think tank dedicated to insightful, cutting-edge, and inclusive research on policy issues regarding Taiwan and the world. GTI's mission is to enhance the relationship between Taiwan and other countries, especially the United States, through policy research and programs that promote better understanding about Taiwan and its people. To this end, GTI has a number of programs, including frequent public seminars, which you are all attending now, our biweekly publication, the Global Taiwan Brief, and 3 podcast series. I am absolutely thrilled to be part of this discussion this afternoon, not only because we have an incredible lineup of panelists before you now, but because this topic is not often discussed in the Taiwan policy space. So I'm very much looking forward to our discussion today. So we'll first allow our panelists to provide some brief remarks on their specific area of expertise and then conduct a moderated discussion, followed by an audience Q&A. So if you are watching from home, you can submit your question in the YouTube chat, tweet us at Global Taiwan, or email us email contact@globaltaiwan.org. So we're going to get started, and to lay the foundation for our discussion, I'd like to turn to our first panelist, who will hopefully expand on the relationship between foreign assistance and diplomacy. So Bonnie Glick is the inaugural director of the Krach Institute for Tech Diplomacy at Purdue, a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Relations, and a fellow in Harvard's Institute of Politics. She formerly served as the Deputy Administrator and Chief Operating Officer of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. Prior to her appointment at USAID, Glick served as the Deputy Secretary of the Maryland State Department of Aging. She worked for 12 years with IBM and served 12 years as a U.S. diplomat in the Department of State. So, Bonnie, over here. Yeah, there you go.
Zoe, thank you so much for the invitation to join all of you today with this terrific panel to talk about opportunities in Taiwan Foreign Assistance Program. As Zoe said, I ran the U.S. Agency for International Development for 2 years, and I was often asked, what's the point of American foreign assistance? Why is the U.S. the largest bilateral donor in the world? Why should U.S. taxpayers spend upwards of $40 billion a year to help people who live so far away while we have our own concerns here at home? These are all valid questions, but the answers are equally as valid. Foreign assistance from USAID as well as from other agencies amounts to less than 1% of the American federal budget each year. So while it's still a large dollar amount, when put into perspective, it sounds like less of a budgetary hit. But what we're able to do with that money is worth exponentially more than the flat figure itself. Foreign assistance, whether for economic development purposes or for humanitarian purposes, is an invaluable foreign policy tool. It helps to send the message that the United States is a partner. We call our activities part of a journey to self-reliance. Who doesn't like a travel companion? A journey to self-reliance in partnership with the United States and other donors who ask nothing in return but good stewardship of their taxpayer dollars. Well, that's a great trip to be on. So the other thing that foreign assistance opens up is a new avenue for people-to-people engagement. Foreign assistance usually is not based in a country's capital city. It's usually dispersed all around a country. Being able to engage with local partners and local consumers gives that much more connective tissue to America and to the generous American people. When it was first announced that I'd be working at USAID, A young Pakistani woman who worked for me at the time came up to me with a photo from her hometown of Lahore, Pakistan. It showed a health clinic with one of the developing world's most recognizable signs, clasped hands saying USAID from the American people. She said that it was the clinic that she and her family always went to because they knew that Americans had built it. You can't buy that kind of good publicity and good public relations. You have to build it. Foreign assistance and promotion of America's engagement in the world is a false force multiplier for our diplomatic engagement around the world. Whether it's things like that health clinic in Lahore or schools or entrepreneurship programs for young people or immediate support following a hurricane or a typhoon or a humanitarian crisis. Those clasped hands alongside the American flag tell the story of American generosity in ways that genuinely matter to individual people and to our presence around the world. Which brings us to Taiwan. How can American cooperation and collaboration with Taiwan through development assistance help to convey to the world Taiwan's story? Taiwan doesn't have the benefit of formal diplomatic relations with a lot of countries. Yet its informal relations with much of the world through economic and financial markets, educational exchanges, people-to-people familiarity, and of course, through foreign assistance is very important. The lion's share of Taiwan's assistance, especially things like economic development in technology, agriculture, health, etc., is in the form of what Taiwan refers to as technical assistance or capacity building. That's lingo for training. Taiwan deploys experts to developing countries to help them to build their own futures with immense assistance from Taiwan. The United States does this as well, and it's really important. But I would posit that Taiwan can look at some additional ways of crafting a development assistance program that includes more direct amplification of Taiwan's involvement. Think of it as planting a Taiwanese flag everywhere where Taiwan has an impact. In the past, Taiwan has been somewhat loath to do this because, well, I don't know, intimidation. But maybe Taiwan is concerned about looking vulnerable to countries where it does not have formal diplomatic relations. But I would say that raising the Taiwanese flag alerts countries that it is there as a partner, as a friend, and to be helpful. That said, monetary contributions from Taiwanese taxpayers have value, and that value should be acknowledged. To that end, partnering with the United States and other like-minded and allied countries to showcase Taiwan's development assistance through joint programs, co-financing, and most importantly, co-branding. These are all ways in which Taiwan can gain prominence. The Taiwanese flag can and should be recognized and recognizable worldwide. Partnering with the United States, the European Union, and other larger donors also has the potential benefit of helping Taiwan with some of its partners. I'm thinking about an article that I'm sure we all read last month, where Paraguay may have tried to condition its diplomatic relations with Taiwan on the investment of $1 billion from Taiwan into Paraguay. What was my initial response? My initial response was that Taiwan's ambassador in Paraguay should reach out to the American ambassador and should have an immediate joint program with all three flags, America, Paraguay, and Taiwan, represented at a national and widely amplified event promoting joint cooperation and joint collaboration. This is a way that Taiwan can differentiate itself in the landscape of global donors, and it can also differentiate its genuine assistance from what I refer to as the so-called assistance from the People's Republic of China, their Belt and Road Initiative. We have an expression in English that nothing attracts a crowd like a crowd. This is the philosophy that's behind crowdfunding. Forming crowds around development programs that Taiwan offers, making them splashier rather than flying under the radar, I think will redound well to Taiwan diplomatically, as well as on a genuine people-to-people level. The same absolutely holds true in other geographies. Leverage great US-Taiwan relations and collaboration across the Caribbean. Leverage those same relations with Australia in the Pacific Islands. Make use not just of diplomatic allies, but of like-minded friends. All of this will help to demonstrate Taiwan's critical role as a development partner and a development leader around the world.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for that. You really set us up nicely for the rest of this conversation. So I would like to further narrow this conversation. You left off with a lot of recommendations for Taiwan. So I would love to turn to our guest from Taiwan, Director Ming-hong, to kind of discuss what Taiwan is already doing in this space and how we're going to move forward. So, Director Yan.
Yes, thank you very much, Zoe, for your introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Ming-hong from Taiwan ICDF, the Director of the Clinical Cooperation Department. And it's quite a pleasure to be part of this great event. And first of all, I would like to express my special thanks to Global Taiwan Institute for inviting me to come all the way from Taiwan to be part of this great event. And I would also like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to GTI for your outstanding work in promoting the understanding of international community and the U.S. community to Taiwan's cultural, social, and economic prospects. And I'm also thrilled to join our great panelists, fellow panelists, and I'm very much looking forward to learn from them on their insights and experience on international development. And to engage today's topic, I think it might be helpful to have a brief introduction of Taiwan ICDF for you to have an overall understanding of who we are and what we do. So ICDF is the International Cooperation and Development Fund. It's a 100% government-owned and established ODA agency. And we are established in 1997, although we are relatively young. But the history of Taiwan's ODA and foreign assistance could trace back several decades ago. It was in 1959 that we have our first foreign assistance projects in Vietnam, which is called the Vanguard projects. We dispatched 6 agricultural experts to support Vietnamese governments to enhance their technology on rice production. And in that time, Taiwan's foreign assistance is divided in 2 systems. One is under the Ministry of Economic Affairs. They have an institution called the International Economic Cooperation Committee. And they are responsible for the industrial park establishments, the SME incubation and development. And the other is under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, called the Overseas Technical Cooperation Committee. And they are responsible for the Overseas Stand Commission. And in 1997, the government combined these 2 committees and established the ICDF. And at the moment, we have 4 main operation tools, including technical operation, international education and training, banking and finance, and the humanitarian assistance. In technical cooperation, which is my department's is responsible for. I will go a little bit deeper later. And for the banking and finance departments, they execute the loan projects and the co-financing projects with the multilateral development banks such as EBRD, CABE, and ADB. And in the international education and training departments, they held scholarship programs and short-term workshop every year. We provide the scholarships to more than 500 students in our allied countries to come to Taiwan to access the higher education training. And we also hold 15 to 20 short-term professional seminars every year in various subjects, including the environment, agriculture, and SME developments, to access the means and high ranking officers to come to Taiwan and learn our experience of developments. As in humanitarian assistance departments, they execute the humanitarian assistance and disaster relief projects, as also the public health and medical training program. In under these four main operation tools, we focus our resources on 6 areas, including agriculture, public health, environment, education, small and medium enterprise, and the last one is the environment. These 6 areas, and the mandates and the mission of ICDF is to support our partner countries to address the social economic development challenges. And as you all know, that the ICDF is very close to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's despite our mandates, we also have our diplomatic objective, which is the first priority is to consolidate our relationship with our diplomatic allies, which is we have 14 diplomatic allies, and we have foreign assistance projects in 13 of them. The only one is the Vatican, which I think they don't need any foreign assistance. And our second diplomatic objective is to expand and deepen our relationship with non-allied countries. For example, in the Southeast Asia, well, we have cooperation projects in Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines, which are the focus countries of our southbound policy. And the last objective is to engage the international participation, for example, the WHA and the UNFCCC, which Taiwanese governments put a lot of resources and hopeful is to have a seat or a observer status in these international organizations. And next, let me dive a little bit deeper in the technical cooperation operation. Our main roles and responsibility in the technical operation project is to support the operation of our technical mission around the world. And at the moment, we have 22 technical missions in 21 countries. And these 21 countries, as I said earlier, the 13 of them are diplomatic allies, as located in Latin America, as the Caribbean, Africa, as Asia Pacific. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we have 8 technical missions in 8 diplomatic allies. They are Honduras, Guatemala, Belize in Central America, and Haiti, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia in the Caribbean, and the Paraguay in South America. In Africa, we have a technical mission in the Kingdom of Swatini, and that is the only one diplomatic allies that we have in Africa region. As in Asia Pacific, we have technical missions in Nauru, Tuvalu, Palau, and the Republic of Marshall Islands. The only 4 diplomatic allies that we have in Asia Pacific. As we also have technical mission in the non-ally countries. For example, in the Asia Pacific region, we have operation in the Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and I mentioned earlier the Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. And so we also have operation in the Saudi Arabia and the Kingdom of Bahrain. And the newest technical mission that we have is in the Republic of Somaliland in East Africa. And as in this technical cooperation is a very unique way that we carry out our foreign assistance projects in Taiwan, because we emphasize a lot on the capacity building, just like Bunny just mentioned earlier. And our objective is to build up the human capital of our cooperation countries. And as for the human capital, we think it's about the knowledge, the skill, and also the health that people need to realize their real potential. So all of our technical cooperation projects is under the objectives to enhance the capacity building and to level up their knowledge and the skills through our technical cooperation projects. So just like I said before, our technical mission as ICDF has our diplomatic objective. As we think, one thing very important is to enhance our visibility in our cooperation projects. That is the reason why we have our technical mission in our partner countries. Because we think the physical presence is very important for us to realize the development, the objective of development projects. It is very important that you have people there to work and with the people of our partner countries to realize the development projects. Our capital mission could guarantee that our projects could be very down to earth and very context specific and fit into the local context. And as for the issue of foresight of our technical mission, we are currently focused on the various issues such as the food security, which is a very important issue for the developing countries at the moment. And we also focus on the small and medium enterprise development and women empowerment. For example, we now have regional projects on the post-pandemic economic recovery and women empowerment projects in the Latin America and the Caribbean region. We integrate the technical assistance and the loan resources to support the women in our allied countries to address the post-pandemic economic recovery challenges. And we also focus on the climate change, especially on the disaster mitigation issue. Because as you all know that a lot of developing countries, they are geographically determined to be natural disaster prone. And so it is very important to enhance their ability of resilience and how to adapt to weather induced natural disaster. And in addition to that, we also focus our resources on the good governance projects, which is we use our experience in using information and the communication technology to enhance the effectiveness and the efficiency of public service, especially those public service provided by our governments, including the public transportation or the e-government system that we have in our ICT projects. And okay, so to conclude, we think what ICDF do to work with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs is to foster and enhance the people-to-people ties through our cooperation projects in our allied countries and non-allied countries. And also in recent years, we particularly focus on using our the results as the outcome of development projects to speak the Taiwan's voice about the international participation, especially in those arenas, just like I mentioned earlier in the WHA and the UNFCCC, that Taiwan could be a positive and a very useful stakeholder to support the international community to realize the international sustainable development goals. And also, we just, like I said, to use our development projects to consolidate the diplomatic recognition from our ally countries is the first top priority of our foreign assistance projects. As Taiwan ICDF has been working very hard on these aspects, and all of our projects are upon request. So we make sure that the outcome of our projects could very highly connect to the development agenda and the political agenda of our ally countries. So this is basically, I think, the role and the responsibility of ICDF in Taiwan to enhance the international space through our development projects.
Excellent, absolutely excellent. Thank you so much, Director Yen. And I do apologize because I did not give Director Yen a proper introduction. I guess I was just too excited to hear what you had to say. But Director Yen, prior to his position as Director of the Technical Cooperation Department at the ICDF, he served as the Division Chief for the Humanitarian Assistance Department as well as the General Management Department. So he has over 15 years of humanitarian experience. So again, thank you so much for your comments. So I'd like to continue to narrow the conversation here. We've just talked about what Taiwan is doing. And I would like to turn to our next speaker to possibly highlight some opportunities, especially with a regional focus. So Dr. Satu Limaye is the Vice President of the East-West Center and the Director of the East-West Center in Washington, where he created and now directs the Asia Matters for America initiative and is the founding editor of the Asia Pacific Bulletin. He's also a senior advisor at CNA Core, or the Center for Naval Analyses. Among his current affiliations are the Center for New American Security Task Force on the U.S.-Philippines Alliance, United States Institute of Peace Senior Study Group on the North Pacific, the Project 2049 Study Group on the U.S.-Australia Alliance, the Korea Economic Institute Advisory Council, and the Global Taiwan Institute's Taiwan-Asia Exchange Foundation project. So Satu, I'll turn you over.
Well, thank you very much, Zoe. Greetings to everyone, and a pleasure and honor to be on the panel with Ming-hong and of course, Bonnie Glick. It has been my good fortune, to be associated with GTI for some time, thanks to its director, Russell, as well. And delighted to be here today to share some thoughts on this important topic. Now, Zoe asked me to focus in on opportunities in Southeast Asia for Taiwan, US and Taiwan, specifically. Before I do, I do want to set up the context, because if we go right into the brilliant summary of ICDF efforts and Bonnie's very eloquent and I think very realistic perception of how aid is perceived and messaged and carried into the region, kind of dovetails with what I want to say. And first, as Russell knows often, I'm about context before you get to the details. What do I think is happening, which really makes this an opportune time to look at Southeast Asia and US times? First, I think what is happening is that you have three big meta forces going, which is strategic competition, not only against Chinese assertiveness, but against naked Russian aggression. This combination has created a context that has been more disturbing for the international environment than in decades. So it creates an open field, particularly the US and its democratic and value-based partners, to work everywhere, including in Southeast Asia. Second, I believe we are facing a degree, not definitive, but a degree of fundamental shifts related to the following. Decoupling of the global economy. You can debate how much, where, on what time. 2, diffusion of power. 3, a decrease in globalization, or at a minimum, a support. And fourth, and finally, elements of a drift in the international system that was established after World War II, at least in the WTO and the other contexts. In other words, the very premises of the international system are seeing some structural shifts that offer more facilitate opportunities that may or may not have been there in a closed, fixed system. The next set of things, as they apply specifically Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific region, is that there are four contests going on, not completely similar from some of the things I mentioned, but important differences. And those four contests in the Indo-Pacific, one is about power, structural shifts. The second is about relationships. And as I've written and said before, there are essentially four relationship dyads in Asia. There is US Asia, there is US China, there is China Asia, and there is intra Asia, which doesn't include either China or the United States. And all are undergoing some systemic shifts that favor, in my view, the US, its allies, and its partners. Happy to discuss. The reason I bring this up in context for what we might do in opportunities is we can no longer fix on what are the official areas and what are the tools. So what's happening in the multilateralism front, for example, is we both have a continued emphasis on ASEAN centrality and APAC and other organizations that you all know about well. But you also have the emergence of new coalitional efforts, whether that be on supply chains, technology, or mineral security, or what have you. The point I'm trying to make in this setup before I get to some elements specifically in Southeast Asia, think about aid, in my judgment, and I will say something that will probably get me into trouble, but I can say for me, is that we're looking at a glass that's half full in terms of being innovative. And I'll come back to that in my closing comments about how to frame it, which is essentially something that Bonnie so eloquently talked about, and what Ming-hong also talked about. What's the purpose? How is it framed? And I want to challenge a little bit of how to think of it. Now, as Russell and Zoe also know, we released Taiwan Matters for America on Capitol Hill recently to show how Taiwan matters for every US state and locality. And this is part of something that I've talked to my friends at USAID about as well, is the need to implicate our aid, because in the new national security strategy and in the new Indo-Pacific strategy, there are two references for the first time in the strategy at least along the line, focusing on these strategies, is the reference to everyday Americans. And now more than ever, in an era of nationalism and populism in the domestic context, telling Americans, these citizens, where their aid is going and to what end is really critical. In fact, we've just released a public opinion poll of state and local elites and publics on whether Asia really matters. And it's quite distinct from the empirical track record. So that's the framework. So let me get to some specifics. Now, Taiwan's new southbound policy, which frames some of these toolkits, like ICDF and other elements, is really, really critical. And as you mentioned, Zoe, I'm working with colleagues here to think through what that means in both the supply side, which is what ICDF is, and the demand side. And the supply side and the demand side in Southeast Asia are, to my mind, there's a delta, there's a gap. And that gap is important to understand because I think it opens up some aperture or some space for us to think about what we do. And that's where I get to the slightly controversial. I understand the need for aid, particularly from Taiwan, to focus on the diplomatic outcomes, alliances, consolidation, expanding space. No one to misunderstand that I don't support this. But in the new environment that I set up at the top, and the new space of the Delta, we may want to think about how much we privilege that and message that versus the opportunities to work in Southeast Asia. Because if it's gone into Southeast Asia with those outcomes, they have less space to maneuver. Therefore, it makes it a more cautious approach. So it's not to say there isn't that going on, but how to frame that and message that when we propose activities or try to close the delta between the supply side and the demand side for the system. The second observation is that there are some official places where Taiwan has room to operate that are more official. One is APEC, which will be meeting in Thailand, and particularly the next 2 years, or because in 2023, we, the United States, will also host APEC. So this gives us a really good opportunity to set some elements into APEC, socialize them over the next 18, 24 months that could help service. And particularly, I would say the APEC NGO sector and the lines of effort within NGOs on the NGO side rather than the purely government. That's one thing I would offer as a specific. Speaking of the NGO side in APEC, and also I might add the Quad. If you see the new Quad Fellowship on high technology and science, my first thought actually when reading that was thinking, that's terrific. Taiwan is a high government of science. Why couldn't there be a supplement or a complement to that fellowship with the Quad, which involves Taiwan? Taiwan's right up there. Key components and key issues that are shaping our high-tech future. Or AI. Next, speaking of NGOs and civil society, I think there's a lot of range for Taiwan to work with civil society and NGO organizations in Southeast Asia. So I've been involved in a project that looks at developing best practices of infrastructure in Southeast Asia. And it struck me that given Taiwan's experience in development, going back to the 1993 and 1993 report on the East Asia American economic, there may well be opportunities here to think about civil society and NGOs that are working in this development space and have direct relationships with it, rather than necessarily government relationships. So I know watching the clock here, I know that I just got a couple of minutes. So let me close with saying a couple of things that I heard in recent meetings about Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and US Taiwan, Southeast Asia that I'd like to flag for you. First, I think there's a really important element of the education partnership that has not been harnessed nearly as and I confess to you that I'm biased because I work for the East-West Center, which is a congressionally authorized, partly congressionally approved institution that's not a think tank, but really to build relations between the US and Asia through education, study, and exchange of human beings. Not just putting out reports, but putting out a report because humans met and shared perspectives. And in that thinking, what's occurred to me is I've been really stunned to know about the alumni networks in Southeast Asia for Taiwan universities. Something I confess I didn't know about. I didn't realize how much education over the last 2, 3, 4 decades has occurred in Southeast Asia, where people are now getting to the key elements of position, being provosts, and presidents, and deans, and education ministers, etc. This isn't very official, but it's a really profound. When I can go to Southeast Asia, for example, and assemble, we have roughly 68,000 alumni spread out throughout Asia. If I want to do something on environment or indigenous rights, etc., I can assemble or convene some of our alumni exchange groups. So really flag that possibility of Taiwan. And then I think there are some areas where I think Taiwan might consider being a seed organization. And seed organization ideas I'm thinking about are setting up institutions of research and education that look at forward issues that govern Southeast Asian needs, and Taiwan has HADR is one. I think there's not just the HADR going into government, kind of looking at setting up some institutions that do tracking, that do some metrics and studies on them, or help shape government responses. It's sort of one step removed from providing expertise and technical capacity to government agencies. So those are some ideas built from this larger context in which I think we're operating. But as I said, I'm really quite hopeful that if we think innovatively about this and maybe with slightly different configurations of end states that we're seeking, we might develop some new ideas to implement both Taiwan, Southeast Asia connections, but also US, Taiwan, Southeast Asia engagement. And please don't forget Europe. I think you will see in the next 3 to 5 years, Europe playing an increasing role in the region, as you've just seen. We work very closely with the Taiwan government at these here center on the Pacific, but I noticed that Germany and Canada both joined the Partners of the Pacific 4 months ago. So there may be some efforts there to work partners in Europe also, and perhaps less available, less forward leaning than just a few months ago. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Satu. And I very much appreciate the notes of optimism as well. So, and there's a lot to discuss there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on something, a clarification actually, that can be quite confusing for those not already involved in the foreign assistance space. And that is the difference between government-sponsored foreign assistance programs and private investment. And then another thing that Satu just brought up, which is NGOs. So both, at a broad level and in the case of Taiwan, how do all of these different levels work together? And is there a difference in how they can help Taiwan diplomatically? Is there room for cooperation between all of these sectors in this arena? So that would be for any of our panelists, if you have thoughts on that.
I'll do ladies first. One of the things that I find very fascinating, sort of anecdotally, when I meet with groups of foreign representatives, whether official government or regular people, everyday people, as you noted, Satu. One of the things that always happens when I meet with groups of people from Taiwan is among the first thing that is referenced is the history of US assistance to Taiwan and the gratitude for American assistance. Let me tell you something. I spent 2 years going all over the world and nary a thank you. Not a joke. It used to frustrate me, with the exception of Taiwan, that without fail, every single Taiwanese referenced USAID's projects to build out university systems through our agricultural extension programs, to build out an agricultural economy in Taiwan, and to build Taiwan into a donor country. This is the ultimate sign of success, when an American investment turns into another investor. And there are 2 other countries that I often reference who fall into this same camp. Sometimes they say thank you. One is Israel, which also has become an economic powerhouse with a dangerous neighborhood that's becoming less dangerous by the day, thankfully. And a major donor, similar to Taiwan in the areas of cooperation and assistance, as well as using development assistance to build friends and allies in countries where they don't currently have formal diplomatic relations. The other is South Korea. And the economic dividends that have accrued to us here in the United States from our investments, taxpayer dollar investments through foreign assistance into those countries has turned into GDP enhancements for the American people that are monumental in terms of trade with those countries, in terms of your next question, Zoe, which is foreign direct investments and the distinction between assistance and investment. And I think those distinctions are really important for us to understand and to think of them exactly as they are, investments. When the United States or Taiwan undertakes a program or a project in an emerging market country, a developing country, it's with an eye toward that country eventually being able to return the favor and to invest, whether monetarily or Director Yen, as you said, in the enhancement of human capital. And then those relations that develop on a people-to-people level. We talk about ODA, Official Development Assistance. That's something that comes out of a national budget. But the goal is for ODA to translate into FDI, foreign direct investment. And that's a long-term perspective. That's something that takes time to cultivate, and it takes many years of continued investment of friendship and collaboration in developing countries. One of the things that I like to say when I talk about USAID is that we invest, the American taxpayer invests in emerging market countries. And from an industry perspective, because I came from IBM, I look at emerging market countries as opportunities. When you talk about a country as being an emerging market versus a developing country, you elevate the level of conversation that you're having with an eye toward that future investment possibility. At USAID, they talk about aid beneficiaries. In emerging markets, you talk about consumers. And there's no mom that I know, no dad that I know who wants their child to grow up and be an aid beneficiary. They want their child to grow up and be consumers. And so with that eye, this is where Taiwan really has a tremendous role to play by telling its story. By telling its story when it goes into Southeast Asia or when it goes into Asia Pacific, the Pacific Island countries, Latin America or the Caribbean, even in African countries and places like Somaliland as well, about the Taiwan economic miracle and how a small amount of investment, because trust me, relative to what the US gives to other countries, the investment in Taiwan was small. And the returns, the outsized returns that it brought to Taiwan through the eventual economic miracle over the course of just a couple of decades is really extraordinary. Telling that story and helping countries visualize that journey to self-reliance will then be part of the conversation about investment. How do you get companies, not countries, how do you get companies to invest in, say, climate change efforts in the Pacific Islands? You meet with a minister from a Pacific Island country, and the first thing out of his or her mouth is going to be about climate change because it is vital to their security, national security, economic security, physical security with rising oceans. But you start to talk to them about, okay, so we solve the problem of rising oceans and your agricultural production that is impacted by brackish waters. What's the next step? What's the next step in turning Palau into a really robust tourist attraction? What does that look like in terms of the national investment that comes from Palau as well as investors to build out a tourism industry, to build out the education and capacity building for the local population, to staff that, to build it, to own it, and to expand it? That starts to be the conversation about consumerism. And that's where the distinction, Zoe, I think, about ODA, Official Development Assistance, which everyone should view as temporary, because the goal is to have corporate investment, companies investing, and NGOs to build a vibrant civil society around all of that. That goes as well, Director Yen, to your comment about governance and making sure that governments where assistance is provided are like Taiwan and Israel and South Korea as excellent stewards of that assistance, and who can turn American dollars into magic and miracles, as we've seen in all three of those very important countries. All three also, interestingly, have strategic threats on their borders or around its oceans. And that's something too, that's a tremendous motivator. So if you think about the Middle East and how Israel has navigated that space, or how South Korea has navigated North Korea, or how Taiwan navigates the PRC, it's not dissimilar, if you stretch it a little, to the threats that Pacific Island or Caribbean islands are facing from climate change. It's a real, clear, and present danger that has to be addressed. And I think it gets addressed through ODA, but it also then should be with a vision toward transforming to FDI and true economic partnership.
Thank you so much. What an interesting perspective on that one. Honestly, that's really great. Do either of you have comments on that particular question?
Actually, as Bobby has mentioned, the history of US assistance to Taiwan. Although I don't have the opportunity to be part of that history, I actually have heard a lot of stories from my father and from my supervisor in ICDF. Since the day one of working in ICDF, my supervisor always mentioned about the successful story of the United States assistance to Taiwan, and which we can pass on that experience and that success to our ally countries. So that's very inspiring. And as for the question that Zoe just mentioned, the investments and the development projects, according to our experience, we always have in mind that what can we do to transform our foreign assistance projects to be a lucrative and business opportunity in our partner countries. And as a matter of fact, we try to connect our company, Taiwanese company, to work with ICDF in our ally countries to work hand in hand to promote the local business opportunity. But the reality is that the logic of investments and business is still a little bit different from the logic of development. They are talking about earning money. They are talking about to scale up the business. But what we are concerned more at the moment is how to build up the human capital. Is how to enhance the capacity building to our other countries' people. But according to our experience, we now currently try to use another way to create a public-private partnership in our projects. Maybe I can give you some examples. In Central America, one of our national-owned enterprises, agro business, they are thinking about investing the avocado in the Central America, which is a very important crop in Central America. But they are a little bit hesitated because of the risk, because the agribusiness in the Central America is still waiting to be developed. And those farmers organizations, they might need some more capacity building to make sure the supplies of the avocado will be very stable. So this is right where the ICDF project comes in. We work with the local governments to train and to help support local farmers to enhance their agriculture productivity and knowledge and technology, so that they could be a reliable source of supplies to the Taiwanese company who have intention to invest in Central America. So this is still working, and we hope that this customer relationship could be another example or model in our project portfolio. Another example is in Africa. There are a lot of textile Taiwanese companies invested in the Kingdom of Swatini. And ICDF, we are carrying out the technical and vocational education and training projects to train the local workers to enhance their vocational skill, so that they could be the potential worker, the source of worker, responsible and professional workers to our Taiwanese textile companies in local investments. So this kind of model is not directly transform our ODA projects into the foreign direct investments, but it's kind of, we think, is a kind of a alternative cooperation between the public ODA projects and the private companies.
Great, thank you so much. And very innovative, as Satu was mentioning earlier, that's the type of creativity that it will take to address some of these issues. I'd like to move to a question that I think really gets to the core and the context that Satu actually set up earlier, which is about age competition. And this is something that a lot of people have witnessed recently play out on the public stage, because as Sonia mentioned, Paraguay recently called on Taiwan to commit $1 billion in investments to the country in order to maintain diplomatic recognition. So although this was later walked back, I mean, like I said, it really put on the stage the main debate of this discussion, which is Taiwan's aid competition with China in an effort to maintain these diplomatic allies. So in that context, what should Taiwan really be aware of as it moves forward in this aid competition space? Should it forge a new path? Should it forge a new strategy, or should it focus on this competition? Is that a source of creativity and innovation in itself? So I'd like to hear any of the panelists' thoughts on this.
Maybe I'll pick up a couple of things. Kind of pick up one thing that you mentioned earlier, just to close the loop in my head here, is I really appreciated Bonnie's and Ming-hong's conversation about calibration of private sector, relationship between development assistance and private sector, transforming ODA to private sector, and the constraints and limits and the problems of doing so. After all, we've had, particularly in the post-45 period, 7 years of efforts to do this. And it has succeeded in some places, you mentioned. Astounding. Here we have now Korea, which had lower levels of social and human development indexes, economic development indexes than North Korea. And now is the 8th largest economy in Europe. Exactly, I'm not sure, but just really profound, Taiwan. Other examples. So I'm not sure I have an answer to that, but I think that we're entering a period where that question of development assistance to private sector relationship is changing for the reasons I outlined. Because I think we're entering a very different context of drivers of growth. So it's not clear to me. To know, it's not clear to me, since for the last 30 years, WTO, trade growth in the global context has been an engine, whether in a fragmented international or decoupled economics, more domestic populist, less market access based international system. We will have the same drivers of trade growth as we've had before. It may well be that much more targeted FDI to like-minded partners, value-based partners, security partners, may be at hand to shave off X%, maybe a percent. So I want to make that point because I think that's at play. And I think Southeast Asia is a place that's particularly going to be at play here because they are part of that middle supply chain, the middle value chain into these big economies that have relied on a combination of ODA and big manufacturing, those being Japan, China, Korea, and to an extent as well, the United States. And so what we're seeing is a pullback from that model. And I do not know what will replace it, but I think it's interesting to navigate what happens when some of these things happen between X% and Y%, that you have middle income countries in Southeast Asia and others who've been part of this value chain. How will they react? And how will the private sector react? Because I think that will help us determine some of the aid allocations of aid. The second is the question that Heather posed about NGOs versus government. Now, not a theoretician, right? I'm a pragmatist, and I think there's nothing immaculate either about the NGO sector or the government sector. I don't think they have to be aligned. I don't think they have to be cooperative. I think it can be overlapping. But in Southeast Asia, I know there are a lot of civil society and NGO organizations that one needn't restrict themselves to the government or for that matter for an NGO civil society. Go out and engage. And as for the final point about competition, there's some things one should compete about and compete on, and some things that you ought to change the terms of competition. So just because there's competition on infrastructure, for example, I've begun to think that maybe that's not where you want to compete head on. Maybe that's not your strength. That's not your forte. Military defense field, sometimes you think about asymmetry. And I wonder if we ought not to think about asymmetry on issues related to competition. Maybe our forte isn't large pots of money for large infrastructure projects, for example. Why not us focus where we're really good, developing human capacity, building technical relationships, funding organizations that produce the best scientists, the best technicians, the best researchers, the best social scientists, etc. Because I think in the end, human capacity will outlive infrastructure. And we have, I've been a little frustrated, you can tell in my tone, that, we feel like we have to counter every project and every new initiative and every multilateral meeting, we throw out a new infrastructure initiative. And yet, having worked in the energy, both the engineering and energy space in the private sector, and I can tell you that that's not the model of how these things get built and decisions get built. You can do that when you have state-driven, state-directed, SOE-based tools. But if you don't, the choices are going to be left to the private sector and to other places. So I'm not sure we always have to compete on dollars or location or end states. Maybe we want to throw a wrench into it and become, as I said, innovative and unpredictable, and throw up some asymmetrical ways of behaving, because it's sometimes the opposition doesn't know how to play that game.
Excellent, thank you, Satu. And I'm sure a lot of those in our audience in GTI's realms who are more of the defense variety would very much appreciate the use of asymmetric. So does anyone else want on the panel have any?
Let me just make a quick comment on the unpredictability and the asymmetric approach. I actually think that what we're talking about is two different words. We're talking about cooperation and assistance from Taiwan, and China is, through its so-called development, the Belt and Road Initiative is debt trap diplomacy. And so having a conversation about competition in the realm of assistance is actually not a useful conversation for Taiwan. Because Taiwan getting drawn into a comparison with China's aid is only going to get to the matching dollar for dollar. Why can't Taiwan do this? Why? China's is not aid. And when you realize that and start the real conversation about what assistance means versus what debt trap diplomacy constitutes, then you start having a landscape on which Taiwan has the upper hand. That's asymmetric.
Excellent, thank you, Bonnie. Director Yin, do you have any questions? Yeah, earning support, that's a great way to put that. I would like to ask one more question before I turn it over to our audience. So for those of you watching at home, once again, you can also submit questions. You can use the YouTube chat, send your questions to contact@globaltaiwan.org or tweet us on our Twitter. So my final question here is, I would like to turn to Taiwan's engagement with non-allies in particular. So especially through aid. So recently Taiwan has donated supplies, funds, and volunteers to Ukraine, and continued with its COVID campaign slogan, Taiwan can help. So that's continued on to other realms as well. And it's also established a specialized office to assist pro-democracy protesters from Hong Kong to aid their settlement and education in Taiwan. So how are these efforts, specifically with Taiwan's non-allies, kind of embracing wider diplomacy goals, and how can this be expanded to other non-allies as well?
Sure. Yep, I think this non-ally countries cooperation is just an expression of a humanitarian value. That's when like many countries, especially those non-allied countries, are facing challenges or disaster like the pandemic. Taiwan would use our comparative advantage, such as in the pandemic area, we are more efficient and more capable of producing the masks. So we can provide this comparative advantage as the resources we have to support non-allied countries to address the challenges. And the objective is to express that we are open to making friends with non-allied countries, even though these non-allied countries are not ready to uh, uh, build up the more official or formal ties with Taiwan, but we still keep these opportunities and open ourselves to let them know that you can reach out to us at any time in different areas, whether it's about economic cooperation or development cooperation.
Yeah, I'll only add to that. I really appreciate the input from a more official point of view, but as I was kind of getting at, I think the end states merit careful consideration. We don't abandon end states, but we also accept new ones. And the example of Ukraine, the example of continued public outreach on health, are kinds of examples of where Taiwan can play in the international space that really has high marks for values-based and supportive work. Where the end state of specific outcomes may or may not be as guaranteed. And it doesn't mean you abandon the end states that you want in the key areas, consolidating relationships, expanding the space in international, working with allied and diplomatic partners. That continues, but I think there's a lot more space for Taiwan in this new environment that I expect to be emerging. To just be a little bit more mobile and flexible and more agile. And that will require kind of thinking about and acting on ways of doing business where I think the region is just changing. Generations are changing in Southeast Asia, especially. Leadership is changing. Yeah, there are downsides. There's more authoritarianism, less democratic space. But these are areas where Taiwan's experience, Taiwan's equities are particularly strong and can be quite useful and inspiring for the next generation. And after all, despite some of the downsides that are occurring in the region, you could see whether it's Hong Kong or whether it's in Myanmar, it's elsewhere that people don't like him. There's some space there for China.
I'll just use that same example of playing the long game and what Israel does consistently. There's a natural disaster, an earthquake in Pakistan or in Iran, and the Israelis are the first ones to offer international rescue assistance, humanitarian assistance. Indonesia with a volcano. And sometimes Iran to date has never accepted the offer. It's always made, but other countries with whom Israel does not enjoy diplomatic relations, some of which may even be in a state of war, have accepted Israeli rescue assistance because they are known as among the best in the world, as well as the first on the scene. That's long game. And I think we're starting to see it play out in the Middle East with enhanced diplomatic relations, normalized relations, they call it, with 4 new countries. And that kind of approach of being there and being that kind welcome at a time of crisis, whether it's pandemic, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's just we are here to help because we have technical assistance in which we are the best in the world, that will have an impact. And I do believe long game, especially in these transforming societies, will reap benefits for Taiwan.
All excellent points. Thank you so much. I'd actually like to start our audience Q&A portion. We do have a question from our online audience. This one is specifically for Director Yen, but I do believe, Satu, you may have some thoughts on this as well. But it is from a member of GTS Advisory Board, Shirley Khan. Shirley asks, Director Yin, you've reviewed Taiwan's broad range of training that increases human capacity of many countries for decades. Today, however, infrastructure is a priority worldwide, including U.S. attention. Is Taiwan's foreign assistance making infrastructure a priority, especially in Pacific Island countries, even beyond the 4 countries that recognize Taiwan? If so, how?
Well, yes, the infrastructure is how the priority needs of a lot of developing countries. However, I just speak for ICDF. Because the ICDF limited resources, although we have our long resources of projects, actually we are not focused a lot on the infrastructure aspects. However, we do want to connect with all the donor countries or multilateral development organizations such as CAPE in Central America, or IDB in the American region, ERD. Through the co-financing chain, we could have a valid use of our loan resources to invest in the infrastructure in the developing countries. I would like to provide another way of thinking this problem, that the infrastructure is not just about the construction and the building of some where it's also about operation and the management of, no matter it's a port, roads, or some big buildings. And this is why where Taiwan could offer a better assistance in our experience. Just like what I said, we try to build up the local human capital in this regards. So maybe in the future, we have a chance to work with other donor countries to use their resources to build up the infrastructure, as we can provide our technical assistance in the human capital enforcement, so that it could be a good combination of resources and experience to address those development challenges and satisfy those needs in the developing countries.
Great, thanks for your perspective on that. Any comments from the other two panelists? Okay, excellent. So I would like to open the floor to this gentleman over here.
Thanks so much for the presentation. My name is Ken Scalpin. I'm a corporation, a Japanese private company. So I have one question and one comment. So, but before that, I also want to say, Bonnie about although this is not a bilateral assistance, but because our Shinkansen and also main highway to the US Taiwan, because this is the assistance for worldwide. Also want to say thank you. But my question is about recent act. I found some provision mention about the IDB. So this provision the US government to make an effort to join the IDB. So is there any implication or do you think it is possible for Taiwan to join IDB? And then my comment is I also want to mention about the unoffshore the donation from Taiwan to Japan. When we have a big earthquake 2011. So we have 200 million donation from Taiwan. It's the biggest donation from single country. Thanks Taiwan. And I think it should be emphasized by the government or by Taiwan government. So you have a big contribution and donation when we have a disaster. Also, we also have a big donation to Taiwan when you have a natural disaster. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the IDB question? And for those in our audience, that's the Inter-American Development Act. Yes, so any comments on that?
This is the Senate legislation.
I
The
don't know much about
rulemaking in the development bank for how they make decisions on new membership.
It's lobbying though, right? I mean, this is on Taiwan to lobby the member nations of the IDB through those great relations with the Caribbean countries, Central America, Paraguay. But it's an IDB decision, not a US government decision.
We see that playing out in other groupings as well, for sure. Yes, yes, this should work.
Hello, my name is Ethan Franz. Actually, to add, to jump off of that, I think another interesting comment is that another large beneficiary of Taiwanese aid is actually also China, especially during the Sichuan earthquake a few years ago. When I was listening to Ms. Glick's opening statement, I was reminded of the Oscar Wilde quote, "It is better to be talked about than to not be talked about." And when I'm thinking of all the possible flags that being planted throughout various projects by the Taiwanese, I can't help but think of there also being another soft power strategy being involved here, and that is flags planted. China decries that its territorial integrity is being violated in some shape or form for about a week. Could that, and Taiwan's response to that, also be a strategy in getting its image out, having more people understand exactly what it can offer, especially in contrast to what's described as debt trap diplomacy? Thank you.
Love the Oscar Wilde reference, and I'll use the Richard Nixon for reference as well. No such thing as bad publicity. Right? It's the same concept fundamentally, that getting the word out and the value behind that. Gee, I couldn't agree more that what an opportunity when Taiwan plants a flag, maybe plants a flag with a partner country and another partner country. So say a joint program with the United States and the beneficiary, the emerging market country, or Europe, a European country, the EU, Australia, whatever, Japan. It's also a great opportunity, not just for Taiwan to push back against China's childish protestations, but also for those two partner countries to push back and say we couldn't do this without Taiwan. Or if it's just a bilateral situation, we couldn't do this without Taiwan. That type of thanks and credit giving it can't be bought. It has to be genuine. And that's what assistance is. It's citizens of a country saying, we as citizens view this as our moral responsibility to help others in countries who are on their journeys to self-reliance. So amplify the heck out of it. No such thing as bad publicity, and hats off to you for the Oscar Wilde references. Well, thanks, Ethan.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. And I love the point about, PR that good cannot be bought. That's a really great point. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Thanks for all the inspiring notes. I'm from Taiwan and I'm now studying GW Valley School at the first year. And I used to work with legislative field in Taiwan. And I've experienced working on the foreign assistance policy white paper this year going to publish. And I've experienced to exchange the idea with all your coworkers. But that one question is also about the flags. I love these ideas because Taiwan just do a lot of work under the table, but not on the table. But Taiwan can help as a good PR strategy. And then these people are going to think that, oh, Taiwan has been included in this international world, but haven't been recognized. we have to a lot of contribution to do this. But how to strike a balance to become more like symbolic and substantial way for Taiwan to stand in the foreign assistance place. Like I love the flags ideas and I think that is a good PR strategy. But if we are going to put like in instance, this is the foreign assistance use, not like diplomat news about China and Taiwan about this old politics. And it would be like more abstract to all the news focus. We want to people focus on how Taiwan going to contribute this world, but not in the Taiwan and China like politics. So how can we work like more practical about these PR issues, like flags or something strategies? And I also want to make a comment about like best trade policy for China, but Taiwan provide a bad out strategy.
Ah, that's good.
It's not a bad trap, but bad out. Thank you.
Any thoughts on this?
That's great, you're hired.
Yes, Director, Ian, do you have any specific thoughts about that?
Yeah, just some thoughts about the flag things. It's just like I said earlier, that our work is to enhance the visibility of Taiwan. We've been trying to say as much as we can that Taiwan can help, that Taiwan's helping. But it is also true that in some area, especially in the international arena, that Taiwanese flag is not allowed to be seen. For example, in the climate change UMF CCC is one of the cases. But still, we are trying to do a lot of projects to address the challenge of climate change, because we think, first of all, you have to say that what you can do and what you can contribute to the international community. Then, step by step, when you have more and more outcomes and results, the international community will know that Taiwan could be a good actor and a supportive stakeholder to join this community to address the big issues such as climate change, all together with other countries or international organizations in this area. So this is more like our strategy to express that we actually can help. Then we won't fight some visibility connected to this real.
I think that big picture perspective is a great way to end today's panel. So thank you again so much for everyone who's attending in person and for those watching online. If you would like access to the recording of this event, it will be available on our website, www.globaltaiwan.org. Make sure you grab something to eat before you leave, and thank you so much for attending.